What is really going on, Crypto Savages? This is your host, C. Edward Kelso, Editor-in-Chief out at CoinSpice.io, back with another episode of the CoinSpice podcast, and this time around I've got Stephen Harrison. He's quickly becoming one of my favorite writers in that he's able to inject himself into a subject in such a way that even though you think you kind of know it well, he brings to light some of the quirkier aspects, the funnier aspects. There's always a bit of humor in how he writes, but more importantly, he really shines a light on, again, what the reader maybe had previously thought she knew already. And I'm speaking here in particular of his take, I think it was last summer, on the Bitcoin Wikipedia page. And it was still is really, but was a giant source of controversy, claims of censorship, claims of conspiracy theories about who controls it. And Stephen Harrison just went out and found out who the curator was. That's an interesting story. The background explains so much of why what's happened has happened. But then more recently, Harrison now has taken up a column with Slate magazine, the Slate Online, SLATE, where he examines Wikipedia in depth. And he's been doing it now for a few months, and it's absolutely fascinating. It's the world's largest repository of human knowledge, I think probably ever in the existence of humankind. And so it's kind of good to know about its workings and how this fleshes out and what some of the issues are, problems and good and bad. And what's great about Harrison is that he gets into Wikipedia. He really, really tries to separate out the wheat from the chaff. And just a fascinating guy, and I love his writing. I think you're really going to enjoy the episode. We get into all of that. Bitcoin Wikipedia page, the problems with Wikipedia in terms of citations, hoaxes that go on. He's just a font of knowledge and a fun interview. Really enjoyed this. Another selfish one. I can't believe I get paid to do this, so it's fantastic. But in any event, go ahead, grab yourself a glass of milk. I'm not the one to judge you. If you're vegan and you want the whole almond, soy thing, you go ahead and do that. But it's gonna get spicy. Without any further ado, here is Stephen Harrison.
What is really going on, Crypto Savages? You are listening to the CoinSpice podcast with host C. Edward Kelso, Editor-in-Chief at CoinSpice.io, your home for spicy crypto things on the net.
So it's rare that I get a chance to, kind of talk to someone I really admire in the journalism space. And a Stephen Harrison article is at this point mandatory reading. And I didn't connect you to Slate and to a previous article I'd read on the author of the Wikipedia Bitcoin page until I secured this interview, actually. So anyway, I'm super happy to have you here. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks so much, Edward. Happy to be here.
Very, very cool. So first off, you have now made it a kind of a cottage industry to cover Wikipedia. And my guys and gals are very technical, and so I know they know what Wikipedia is. But just in case someone, from the future after the apocalypse comes down and has no idea what Wikipedia is, can you kind of explain to our listeners first off what Wikipedia is or is supposed to be?
Oh, sure. Yeah. We gotta keep the content evergreen, right? But so I'd say, Wikipedia is the fifth largest website in the world. It's actually the only nonprofit in the top 10 based on the traffic that it receives, and it's a open crowdsourced encyclopedia where the volunteers contribute and add information, and there are several Wikipedia or Wikimedia projects that Wikipedia in English I think has about 6 million articles, and that's the largest, and then there's also I think about 137 other different languages that have Wikipedia instances, but it's a large internet encyclopedia. One of the things that I realized pretty early on as I started covering this space is just how much you can, we've all, millennials especially, I'd say, millennials, Gen X, Gen Y, we've all, visited Wikipedia, many hundreds of times. But
yeah.
Even on a day, like an off day, when you don't visit Wikipedia, you're being affected by its information in your Google Knowledge panel, or on Facebook, you start to see, because and the informational clips that are coming through are being sourced from Wikipedia because of the Creative Commons license. And so even if you're not like a huge Wikipedia fan, you're just receiving that information just by nature of being active on the internet.
It is a beast, and it is an information. Well, arguably, I don't even know if it's even arguable anymore. It's the greatest, the largest repository of human knowledge to have ever been assembled, as far as I'm aware. Do you think that's putting too much on it?
I think it's. I do think that's fair to say, that it's the largest assembly of human knowledge. It's hard because previous to this, we didn't have the technology in order to create it. But I think it's fair to say that it is the largest, informational source based on collaborative input, and regardless of whether the form stays in Wikipedia or not, it will just definitely have an impact for generations.
Yeah, there's no doubt, and I have no doubt at all that people rely upon it almost religiously as gospel. Less so as time goes on, and we're all, as a culture, all around the world, becoming a little bit more media savvy, hopefully. And so, anyway, that brings us to why, and you sort of answered it, but why did you decide to write about this subject? What about Wikipedia attracted you personally to now kind of documenting it, really 1,000 different ways?
Oh man, I do tell people it is the most random thing that I've started writing about Wikipedia over the past 2 or 3 years. But I'm a tech lawyer actually by profession. I work here in Texas, and I had started just doing some freelance writing about just kind of op-ed pieces about interesting subjects that I came across. One of them that I wrote is, after having this conversation, honestly, at bars a few times, it was why I didn't think you should call Alexa, like the wake word. I thought should be something else, something maybe more generic, like computer, and that's good for
non-proprietary.
All the stuff. Non-proprietary. That's right. Yeah, and same for Siri for Apple. Like let's pick something generic and non-proprietary. And after I wrote that, an editor at The Outline, which is kind of a new media or culture website, reached out and said, "Hey, we've got some more regular think pieces. Would you like to write a little bit more regularly?" And one of the features they were thinking about was called Wakipedia, which was just review a Wikipedia article like a book review. Just kind of give it the traditional book review treatment. It's an interesting conceit, right? Because a Wikipedia article doesn't just have one author typically. There's, it's a collaboratively written work. I started, when I first heard that, I was like, oh, that's an odd idea. And then I kind of just went at it, and like I had some ideas for it, and I thought it'd be kind of fun to do, and then just being the nature of like online publishing, like, well, that feature was like really quickly canned and that kind of stuff. But I had all these ideas, in the back of my head, just because I was intrigued by it. And I was one of those people who had just read Wikipedia, kind of passively, as subjects came up. I'd read the Bitcoin article on Wikipedia. I read about cloud computing on Wikipedia. It was just one of the sources I started with, and then I go on to other sources. But really, my kind of epiphany moment was I was in New York traveling for business, and I was by and I was looking up a Wikipedia station, or a subway station's Wikipedia article. It was 96 and Broadway, and it was the most detailed Wikipedia page, not even for the subway line, but for this one individual station. And it was, it was so in depth and well written, and just rich content actually. And I was like, who has time to write this stuff? Like, who? And so I just needed to know. I looked it up, and there were two main authors behind pretty much all, and I think there are about 500 Wikipedia pages related to the New York subway. Pretty much behind all of them, there were two names. I looked them up, and I got to know those editors. And it's like a 17-year-old high school student, Shaw Picker,
Whoa.
And a 19-year-old college student, Ryan Ng. Yeah, no, it blew my mind that these were our subject matter experts who were telling something like 100,000 people a year read those articles, and about the subway, and that from there I kind of I aimed a little higher with that piece. I pitched it to the New York Times, and they took it, and from there I've written about 20 or so pieces in publications like New York Times, Washington Post, Slate, and others. And I've just really found this kind of fun niche that I really enjoy, and it kind of touches a lot of the things I'm interested in personally, and pretty grateful for it, actually.
And you do a fantastic job. Like I said in the intro, it is mandatory reading when your articles pop up. And now you're on Slate. But before we get to Slate and the Cytogenesis article that was, really the impetus for my reaching out to you, it's a nice transition actually to talk about one of the more controversial pages. At least it was in our in CoinSpice circles, in cryptocurrency circles. And that's the Wikipedia Bitcoin page. And in case you're unaware, we like the currency side of the cryptocurrency. So there's a kind of a really strange debate when you speak to people outside of our little community here, where they just kind of look at you like, what? But there's a debate about what Bitcoin means, and it becomes very, very, very heated very fast. And the Bitcoin Wikipedia page became a very big source of ire and controversy and so on. And you really took the veil off of what it is and at least how it came about. I'm not sure where it is right now in terms of its authorship, but you as you explained, you were piqued by the idea, and then you discovered who you thought maybe the Bitcoin bro behind the Bitcoin Wikipedia page was. Who was it?
Yeah, I was expecting, as you said, a Bitcoin bro, but it was this guy. His name's Ladislav Masier. He's a 57-year-old grandfather in the Czech Republic outside Prague. And, I think I kind of was expecting a little bit more sinister story. I think, since I wrote the piece,
Sure.
People say, oh, well, he's a deletionist. He just, he's more closed-minded about things. But in general, I think he's pretty much in it just because he's interested in the subject matter. This guy Ladislav, and he's the most prolific contributor at the time. He was, this is about a year ago, most prolific contributor by far to the Bitcoin Wikipedia page.
Yep.
And he just wanted to know how it worked. And as you said, it's a real flashpoint in the community. They, should the history of Bitcoin be part of the Wikipedia page? Should that be a separate article? To me, it was interesting. And, I always have the philosophy of, just put it out there and let people react how they will. But,
Sure.
Found out about who it was. It was Ladislav Masier. He's a 57-year-old grandfather, and he owns no Bitcoin. Like he didn't have, a vested interest in it. And that to me was really interesting. He's a pretty soft-spoken guy, just trying to figure out how this works. The other thing that was really interesting about him, he lives in Prague, but he grew up in the Soviet Union, and he said
this was such a great point that you brought out in that article. Sorry to interrupt. I have a habit of doing that.
No, I love it. Yeah, no, I think.
But I just get excited because it's like I've been wanting to talk to you about this for a while. But that was such an amazing thing that you brought out, because I was ready to pounce. I'm like, we found this guy out. And then you just so warmly and lovingly kind of went into, look, this is who the dude is. And that he was 57 years old just cracked me up. That he owned no Bitcoin cracked me up, and that's in our world that's a big deal. But that he'd actually come from, and obviously because of his age, lived through a pretty repressive time. I guess informed the way he approached Wikipedia and why he found so much value there.
Oh, yeah. Well, he, growing up in the Soviet Union, he said, I hate censorship. And so, there are people who say, hey, we should take down the Bitcoin Wikipedia page because, it's encouraging people to make this investment and stuff like that. He said, no, I don't want censorship. He's not going to let that kind of deletionism take over. The other thing is, and I tried to raise in the article too, I think the reason and it's a little bit of a psychological point, is he kind of saw, foresaw the end of the Soviet Union. He kind of felt that trend coming. And with Bitcoin, the subject matter, crypto, he kind of thought that he was seeing something like that, something transformative. And so that's why he's just, at the very least, he wants to be a very active observer on the topic. And, it's you can, it's an interesting point that he doesn't own any Bitcoin, but
Right.
at the same time, he's preventing the article from a lot of vandalism. A lot of people are trying to say, "Hey, I'm Satoshi Nakamoto. I invented
Yep.
Bitcoin," and so he takes down that vandalism too, and that's I think a good thing. I don't know what you think, but I don't think Satoshi Nakamoto is going to reveal himself on the Bitcoin Wikipedia page.
You just stepped into it.
Yeah.
Oh my God, this is right. Again, for people outside of the space, it's like, who effing cares? But for us, this is a major form of. CoinSpice has kind of an editorial policy right now that moving on. It almost doesn't matter at this point. It's kind of like it really is just this between you and I. It really is kind of the closest way I can describe it to people, sort of the best analogy is a religious idea that the Christ-like figure comes down, he reveals everything, and then he takes off for 2,000 years. So the OGs, the apostles of the Christ-like Bitcoin idea, are left with writings supposedly attributed to him, things that he said or didn't say. There's all these random emails, everything else. So we don't, of course, know who Satoshi Nakamoto is, but there's at least one vociferous claimant. There's more, but there's one that has really kind of pushed it. And our sort of editorial policy now is to just kind of go moving. Like until there's absolute proof, until he comes back from heaven, or however you want to interpret it, we're just done with it. But yeah, and the Wikipedia Bitcoin page became a place where that war was for sure played out. He is, he isn't. Here's the evidence and whatever. And so Ladislav was, kind of caught in the middle of, wait, how do I broach this subject? So,
right.
I think the deeper insight that you really hit, though, was, think about how repressive living under Soviet satellite rule was, and then all of a sudden, having access to libraries and libraries and libraries filled with information, and how much this guy values what he does. And so, if anything, I have to tip my hat to him, because that's brilliant.
Oh yeah, I agree that and he. At first, I didn't quite understand what he was saying, but he was saying he sort of taught himself some computer programming concepts using Wikipedia. And, in any case, like whether you're, reading the material or whether you're writing the material, there's a lot of learning involved in writing a Wikipedia page and or gleaning information from it. And so definitely that educational motive, I think, is a big part of it.
And also guys like Nathaniel Popper of the New York Times, who wrote a book called Digital Gold, which is more or less the definitive early history as far as mainstream is concerned. He has said as a matter of his sort of journalistic integrity that he holds no Bitcoin, and that allows him to not be theoretically swayed by price swings hither or thither, or any of the other insider debates. So that could be, whereas we'd call him I'm almost embarrassed to say it. We'd call Ladislav a no-coiner.
Okay, no-coiner, yeah.
Right. It's almost a pejorative. It isn't, but it kind of like says who you are. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have any skin in the game. Popper would then kind of come back and say, well, actually, you're the one with the bias here. So I find the discussion fascinating and your article brilliant. Did it cause you at all to investigate further into Bitcoin? What's your interaction with cryptocurrency generally?
I'm not. I might be like the New York Times writer that you mentioned, but I would say that the one fabulous thing about writing these articles is you get a lot of email feedback afterwards, and some good, some kind of scary, but for the most part, I just say, I think I learned a lot. I'm kind of, and these aren't easy questions, right? Like even a thing of like whether, hey, should history of Bitcoin be separate than Bitcoin? There's arguments on both sides actually for any of these. These are sort of they're knowledge questions, but they're also just inherently emotional. And I like following them in some ways like a referee, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I was going to say you took the word right out of my mouth. You're calling balls and strikes in a sense, but you're also, again, you're enough removed from the space to give us a nice lens in on it. So I definitely appreciated that. That was a fantastic article. So to kind of, yeah, it really is, and we'll link to all this in the show notes so people can get a chance to read up on what exactly it is that we're referring to. Your more recent piece actually has come by way of a column in Slate, which I believe either you're the curator of or you're at least a huge part of. It's called Source Notes. Can you kind of explain that relationship a little bit?
Yeah. No, I'm a columnist. It's 2 years into this, I have a regular column in Slate, and who would have thought that Wikipedia and this idea of digital knowledge would be enough fertile territory to be its own column. But I think the reading community has really reacted to it, and I think that's kind of really happy that Slate decided to launch this. I think it'll be really interesting, not just even for this year, but for a long while, hopefully. But Source Notes, it covers Wikipedia, digital knowledge, kind of, and by that we mean just facts and information that's online, and kind of just this idea of how to think about epistemology. I don't know if you use that word as much, but it was new to me for a while. It's this idea of the theory of knowledge, and how should we think about it now when knowledge is not so much discovered? That's a more shallow way to think about it, but it's developed. Like, we're developing knowledge, and it's going online. And I'm just loving the different angles that you can take with it. If I write about Wikipedia forever, I think I'll be perfectly happy, because it's not. You get to cover so much with it. You get to talk about Wikipedia. You get to talk about medicine. You get to talk about. My latest was on how information on Wikipedia can end up elsewhere. It's just really interesting stuff.
It really is. And Wikipedia has now been around for 18 years?
Yeah, Wikipedia celebrated its 18th birthday, and so it's an old man by internet standards, but I do like to think of it as just like a very young adult. So
right. And also Slate, if I remember correctly, and again, this shows you what an unprofessional I am. I could have done my research here via Wikipedia. Slate has Slate, if I remember correctly, was started by Michael Kinsley, who I knew from Crossfire fame. Here's a reference you're not going to get all the time. On CNN, when it was he and Pat Buchanan. Do you know if I'm getting that right? Hey, Crypto Savages, this is C. Edward Kelso breaking in with a quick and very shameless plug. CoinSpice.io is a feisty pirate ship. We rely on almost entirely organic growth, which means our audience really does the marketing for us, and there's nothing more powerful than word of mouth. If you read an article you like on CoinSpice.io, if you listen to a podcast and you enjoy the content, or if you're just pissed, please promote us on social media, wherever you're at, wherever that is, whether it's Reddit, whether it's YouTube, the Telegram, you name it, Twitter. Like us, retweet, all that great stuff. You can always find detailed show notes for every podcast on the corresponding page at coinspice.io. There you'll find links to our respective podcasts, your favorite platform like iTunes. Please give us a rating. Please give us a subscribe. All that good stuff. It helps the pirate ship remain afloat. It keeps us going. We appreciate it. As always, you can contact me personally if you have questions, concerns, you want to hear from a particular guest, you have a news tip, at Kelso, K-E-L-S as in Sam O, at coinspice.io. Thanks again for listening. We sure do appreciate it. And back to the episode.
That sounds right. I should be a better Slater myself. But I would say it's editorial team from the New Republic, right, is who we're talking about. But.
Right. If only there were an online source we could both check. But yeah, that's all.
Yeah. Well, you can't trust Wikipedia. No, I'm just kidding.
No. Yeah. Oh, that was great. Well, okay. So in any case, Slate, I would say if you want to give it a bias, would tend to lean progressive. in the U.S. sense of that word politically. But I don't get any of that from your articles necessarily. Your columns seem to be kind of straight no chaser about the tension that you just described, which is, Wikipedia as the source and then Wikipedia as the source. And, it is in many ways decentralized, and all the open source, it's sort of the logical extension of cypherpunks and the open source community and all the wonderful things that we celebrate here. But there are also some interesting dangers that you touch on in the internet's kind of, I guess you're calling it a cytogenesis problem. But let's start here. Who was Dr. Heilman, and how did you come upon him?
Oh, yeah, he's come into two of my pieces now. He goes by Doc James on Wikipedia, and I came across him partly just because I saw his username so much, but he's done some interesting things on Wikipedia. As a doctor, he's an emergency room physician in Canada, and a couple of years ago, I think it was maybe 2012, when we had the Ebola outbreak. He kind of had this insight, and I think it was a really key insight. While he worked in an emergency room in Canada, he actually went to the ER and he said, "Hey, while I'm doing good here, I actually could do a lot more good if you just give me a few days to be my computer, right? And I'll be by Wikipedia, to monitor the Ebola articles." And it made sense. Something like, I think 60% of people were getting information about Ebola from Wikipedia, and he was just making sure that it was accurate in multiple languages, and that the information about its transmission and its prevalence and stuff was accurate. To kind of thinking about a public health crisis, and I was like, I thought that was actually really smart. And this is kind of maybe sort of when I was having a turning point about the quality of information on Wikipedia is, as you said, sort of mixed. But I think some of the medical articles tend to be some of the better ones, right? And it's partly because
that's what he said, right? He said it actually is not all that bad.
Yeah, it's not all that bad, and I think I was trying to get some research one way or the other on that. But one of the studies that I think was really key that was done on that is they gave medical students a standardized test, and not the bar exam, I'm a lawyer, but it resembles the board exam. Sure. And it has Wikipedia up to date, which is sort of like a paid subscription service for physicians and medical professionals, and then a textbook, Harrison's Anatomy, and then the students afterwards were retested based on that source that they had. And actually, the students who had Wikipedia did the best. They outperformed. And
awesome. I believe that.
And I was trying to push them, like, well, why did the Wikipedia students outperform? And it was like, it's pretty user friendly. We've used it for so long that we forget how easy it is that there are all these inline links, and like the articles are connected, and they're that's kind of growing really quickly, and it's very current. And the accuracy, right? Like, it's since that, it was actually, I think, a 2006 Nature study that showed that Wikipedia, or indicated that Wikipedia was as accurate or as inaccurate, had the same amount of inaccuracies as Encyclopedia Britannica at the time, right?
And a lot of the people who are listening have no idea what you're referring to.
Oh yeah, okay. This is a turning point for Wikipedia, right? It's that, and it also, like, I don't know, how it seems far back, but it's not that far back really. That Microsoft had Encarta, and there was Encyclopedia Britannica, and they were sort of not yet completely threatened by Wikipedia.
But those dudes used to come door to door. They would sell it to you. There's the World Book. There's a couple other ones that they would come door to door, and if you were a parent and you had a child of school age, you got that acidy taste in the back of your throat by turning him away, the encyclopedia salesman, because you thought, well, gee whiz, I want to give my kid. And I'm totally pulling this out of my butt, but I remember them being like $1,000 or something crazy. Monthly plans and shit. So it's like, this was a big deal to be compared to the Encyclopedia Britannica, held on par right? And then in some cases surpass it. So that's no small point.
Oh yeah, it was huge, and it greatly upset them. But especially Encyclopedia Britannica, because like you said, it was $1,000 product, and it's very labor intensive to put an encyclopedia together. But that was a real turning point for the community. That with Heilman, the first article about him was a little bit more, I'd say, pro Wikipedia, the information on Wikipedia, and I've since written some that are a little bit maybe more critical, but trying to kind of keep that balance.
Yeah, and it's wonderful. So Heilman resurfaces recently in the internet's dizzying cytogenesis problem, and you go into a brilliant. It's a quick piece. It's not super long or laborious, so it's a really nice read. But it'll get you thinking about sort of in that meta fashion that you're famous for, thinking about thinking, and you talk about Heilman and how he started to look at the sources and the sources were actually citing Wikipedia sources on the Wikipedia page, and it became this kind of, I don't want to be gross, but a circle J, right? And so, let's get into some of the quicker things here, like the Jared Owens hoax. That's fascinating to me.
Yeah, I know your listeners can't see it, but I'm making a circle with my, because that's what cytogenesis is, this idea that something comes from Wikipedia and then it goes into the news, and then that news citation that news source becomes a citation back on Wikipedia. So like as you said, it's completely circular. And yeah, Jared Owens hoax is a user. He went to the Wikipedia article, and his name was probably Jared Owens, right? But he created this sort of fictitious Australian Aboriginal god, and Jared Owens, right? Jared Owens, and then it gets picked up, and all these news sources, and then actually, it's been included in books by scholars about Aboriginal culture.
Oh my God!
And it lasted for 10 years. And why can something like that fly under the radar? Well, not everyone's looking up Australian Aboriginal deities, but it's in all fairness, who knows how many people were looking at that article, but
just to tell you how sick my humor is, I love this stuff. Okay, so I understand that people get very upset and they put their hearts and bodies into producing their papers and so on. But it's the sort of the Howard Stern Baba Booey phenomenon made flesh. So Howard Stern, of course, shock jock, all the rest of it. He had a producer named Gary Dell'Abate who he made fun of incessantly. That became a sort of a meme before memes existed on the show, of calling him Baba Booey. And so Howard Stern listeners, because Howard was kind of considered this bad boy thing, was kind of set aside, his listeners would go out and really get in between a news coverage and a very serious story. Say the OJ chase. And there's
right.
I may be mixing it all up now, so don't quote me on this. You have to go to Wikipedia. But so OJ's being chased or whatever, and then Peter Jennings, who at the time was sort of our Walter Cronkite, which again, all these references, no one has any idea what I'm talking about. But he was a very trusted name in news. On the line we have so and so who's right there watching the, who's a great source of information about OJ and all that's going on right now. And so the guy gets on, and I'm actually watching this live, and I know the voice, even though he says, "Yeah, my name is John Smith, and I'm right here looking at OJ or whatever." And I'm like, "Wait, I know that voice," because I listened to Stern on the radio, and it was Captain Jenks, who was this supposedly autonomous guy that would just go out and phone call prank the news media. And so Jennings basically interviews Captain Jenks as if. He doesn't know he's Captain Jenks, but Captain Jenks as if he's, the Dalai Lama or some really legitimate, can you tell us what you're seeing? Yes, Peter, I see. And all of a sudden he comes out with Baba Booey, and then, of course,
Al Michaels has to get on and tell Peter, hang up on him. He's joking. Peter's, already with a follow-up. So you say there's a Baba and a Booey, you know what I mean? It's hilarious. and so everybody else was like, oh, could you take this double murder tragedy? And I was like, okay, that's shrill, and you're missing the genius of what just happened. He broke the matrix. He red-pilled a whole generation on don't trust these fools. Don't trust them. Don't do it. So I think the Jared Owens idea is along those lines. Do you agree, or do you just find him just terribly annoying?
Well, I kind of sort of, as you probably seen from my columns, I'm like kind of two minds about it. Like there is like, a public health reason sometimes, or like a public service of like having good information about, Ebola, for example. I think, a lot of people, sometimes they learn about different technologies and stuff from Wikipedia, but you gotta admit that there's a certain, as you said, intelligence or creativity for something like the Jared Owens, or my other favorite is I wrote about the sport of curling's Wikipedia page, and every 4 years during the Olympics, right, there's just like this huge battle, and I think it reflects the fact that a lot of people are like, they don't take curling seriously, and so
I don't believe that for a second.
or they get angry that it is a sport. There are. So people will classify it and say, well, it's in the Olympics, it's not a sport, or they'll do kind of the Bart Simpson thing, where he's writing on the board the same few lines over and over. They'll put curling is not a sport. Curling is not a sport. There was one and I forget the curler's name, but they basically just kept changing his article to say that he was Super Mario. And this guy, if you look at this guy, he has a Super Mario mustache. He kind of looks like a short Italian plumber guy. He does look just like, just like that character. And so you got to admit some of the vandalism is really funny, and I think it can be done in a way that it is what would you call the Howard Stern thing, a parody, or right. Pointing to things. I think that can be done correctly.
Yeah, and I don't think Howard Stern or Captain Jinx were trying to do any
permanent
disruptive media critique or anything, but they wound up bumping into it. I think Stalin's toilet is something I learned from you. Is hilarious. Can you go into that just a little bit?
Oh yeah, well, there's this major street in Berlin, and if you've got some German listeners, they'll probably know what I'm talking about. But it's a major boulevard or a major street in Berlin. And in 2009, an anonymous editor said that the Karl Marx Alley, this major boulevard, said it was like the nickname for it, or what people were actually calling it was Stalin's bathroom or Stalin's toilet, right? And so once that's on Wikipedia, these like newspapers start quoting that, right? And in fairness to journalists, I'm of two minds about this. Journalists, especially now with the economics of journalism, they have to go really fast, right, to get the content out.
Yep.
They're really relying on Wikipedia. That's one. Two, there's no excuses. You can't use Wikipedia as your sole source for an article. Just because Wikipedia says a street is called Stalin's toilet doesn't mean that you can write about that as a journalist. So that's on the journalists, right, for this happening in part. But so the journalist wrote a newspaper article in German newspapers talking about how this major street, everyone's calling it Stalin's bathroom, Stalin's toilet, and from that, some information that was originally unsourced on Wikipedia, didn't have any source for it, the Stalin's toilet name, now has a legitimate newspaper link in the article saying that, this is, according to this XYZ newspaper, it is known as the street. And that's when, this is what I think is the real twist, the original editor who made the change on Wikipedia and called it Stalin's toilet, he was a journalist, and he kind of raised his hand and say, hey guys, I just made this up. Like, FYI, I just made this up.
This is a great twist. Yeah.
Right. This is the best twist. I love this. And so he tried to take it down, And other editors on the site said, well, no, like this is in major publications. They kind of weren't getting it. They were saying, like, you can remove information that's unsourced, but this is sourced information. So to undo his Wikipedia vandalism, which, a good citizen that he was, he wrote in the newspaper that he worked, because it turns out he was a journalist, that he made this up and he's sorry about it. And in fact, this was just something that came out of nowhere and not actually a common name for the street. And from having that sort of citation, this citation that sort of was a counter reference to the original article, with that counter reference, they were able to remove the bad information from Wikipedia. So it just shows, how is, especially when information comes in that's unsourced, that it can just promulgate and just become this circular issue. And Randall Munroe, who coined the term cytogenesis, I got to give props to him. I think he had this idea that this was happening and it couldn't happen, and it's just now been a few years and we've got a few examples of it, and so we know it does happen. That unsourced information on Wikipedia can just go through major publications, and as you said, this circle just kind of keeps happening.
And I am of the opinion, and it doesn't really matter what I think, they want to hear what you think, but I'm of the opinion that it very much mirrors crypto and cryptocurrency, in the sense that we're all kind of discovering what this is. I know it's been 20 years out, and since 1994 we've had something akin to the web. We still don't really know what it is that we're doing with this idea of all this information and all this out there. I'm of the opinion that Wikipedia is first off a great benefactor to humanity, but also the model it uses of move fast, break things, a la Mr. Zuckerberg, and getting it out there and then sort of backtracking. I think, although it is sloppy to those in the profession and those who want to be careful and so on, I think it's kind of it sort of highlights to me that it really has always been the case that these guys and gals who are gatekeepers of information have always sort of cited one another as authorities, and they've always kind of done this. It's taken, kind of this weird motley crew, this melange of strange people and decentralized comings together to reveal it in the open. So I don't think it's necessarily a Wikipedia problem, so much as it is finally we're acknowledging kind of sort of the inherent problem of appeals to authority. Did I make any sense at all?
No. Well, first of all, as you said, I love this kind of meta stuff. I think you're probably right that in the sense that the knowledge, back in the days of traditional gatekeepers, and for your listeners, I think, what I mean by gatekeepers is like the professionals, like if the experts were academics or had this credential, or traditional media gatekeepers, things like that. I think you're probably right that they kind of were kind of getting the information from each other, and it was a lot more of a kind of a collaborative, kind of made up thing. Anyway, Wikipedia is so hard because it's got like three kind of conflicting strands, is the way I see it. It's got this kind of utopian strand of, let's get the free knowledge out there. And like you said, it's a great benefactor for humanity. And that almost seems, I don't know what the word is, but it's just a non-profit motive and I think I'd say a lot of the editors have that sincerely. That's kind of what motivates them, right? Two, there is now, especially a really bureaucratic strand, and there are a lot of articles that are very hard to edit, because if you make a change to that, you've got, especially with mobile technology, you've got 1,000 people watching that article, and they're gonna undo it, or they're gonna say they're gonna dispute your sources, and so it's not actually completely free reign anymore because of the bureaucracy.
Right.
But third, there is, and as what you pointed to, this libertarian or anarchical thread of for a lot of the content of like, let's just do it and let's just be bold. Be bold is one of the 5 pillars of Wikipedia, and it's had it for 18 years. And there are people who are kind of like, well, the philosophy of it is eventualism, that maybe the article
Right.
is really short right now, it's a stub or something like that, and it'll get better over time, or maybe it's got some inaccuracies in it and it'll get over time. But it's better to kind of have that freedom, a lot of people think, than to put some clear rules. Because with the cytogenesis problem, they could have maybe solved it by saying, okay, every news source or in every new bit of content on Wikipedia would require a secondary source to add it. Like there's a technological way to do that, actually. But the Wikipedia community doesn't want that. They don't want that kind of, because it would slow down the spread of free knowledge in their view. And I think a lot of them saying that's not what we want this project to be. But yeah, as you said, there's definitely a libertarian thread that's a pretty big undercurrent in Wikipedia.
Wow. I have learned a ton through your writing, and you were so gracious to come on. I realize you're slammed with everything that you do. Where can people, if they want to follow you or find more of your work, where can they find you on the web?
Sure. I'd say, follow me on Twitter or StephenHarrison.com. I've got all my articles up there. I've got a newsletter. I'm just excited. I think there's more to come. I'm pretty pumped for it.
Yeah, and again, Stephen Harrison is mandatory reading. Whether you're into Wikipedia or not, it's one of these things that when it comes up, you just know you're going to learn something. I refer to him as kind of dessert reading. So I get through with some other things, and then I go to my Stephen Harrison article, and boom, there he is. It's nourishing. It's good. It makes you kind of sit back and look at the world slightly different. And I really cannot pay a higher compliment to an author. So thanks for all you do. Thanks for coming on, man, and best of luck.
Thanks so much, Edward. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.